Hello, Pallavi. Thank you so much for joining the internal communications series that I run on my blog. As you know, this is a long running series, and I invite thought leaders to talk about their perspectives, their opportunities, the challenges they see with this important function. So, thank you so much for taking the time. So, before we get started, it would be great if you could introduce yourself for our viewers.
Sure. Thank you very much, Anisu, for having me. And it's an honor to be with you in this conversation series. And it's going to be a pleasure to have a conversation with you around this topic, which is very critical, internal communication. So I currently head communications at Bridgestone India. And have a little over 17 years of industry experiences. Have worked with another Swedish company for a very long period of time. I did head marketing and communications for SKF. And then after that, I went into a little sabbatical while my son was growing.
Okay.
And I also did a little consulting during that period, was associated with a search firm,
Okay.
and then got into the second phase of my career and joined Bridgestone and am heading communications with Bridgestone now.
Fantastic. And you're based out of Pune, is that right?
Yes, I am based out of Pune.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's begin by asking you the first fundamental question. So, what is your definition, or what does internal comms mean to you?
Oh, a wonderful question, Anisu. And internal communications to me is a function that enables and builds the culture of the company. It is a function which kind of helps us to instill a sense of ownership and pride among the employees,
Right.
and helps them to kind of understand the vision of the organization, the higher purpose of
Right.
why this company exists and what are we gearing up to. And I
Got it.
think this is what is the prime objective of internal communications, to be able to translate the vision, the values of the organization to the last man standing, so
Right.
that they understand what it is all for and how can they contribute. Making this entire journey very inclusive is
Got it.
what internal communications to me is.
Fantastic. I like the word inclusive because I think a lot of people don't want to include others in this, practice of communication. So tell me about how does it get practiced in your organization? What are some of the nuances of it? What are the channels? What are the resources? How do you go about communicating internal communications?
Sure. Again, a wonderful question. Aniso, I've had a privilege of working with extremely great organizations, whether it was my previous one or this, where communications is pretty critical in the organization,
Mm.
and the leadership understands the real need of communication and what they bring to the table. So very
Right.
fortunate in that respect of understanding what communications means to business from a leadership point of view.
Got it.
And with that perspective, what we have been doing is a very transparent and open culture of
Mm.
driving communications in the organization.
Right.
So it's not only a top down, of course, there are messages, information, strategy, which needs to be cascaded and communicated top down, but it's
Mm.
also about enabling dialogue and conversation
Got it.
around strategic topics which are critical to the organization. So I
Mm.
think that's what we do here in my current role at Bridgestone as well, wherein it's all about ensuring that we are building a conversation around topics which are very critical to business, around
Right.
topics which are very important to the organization, and how do we ensure that we involve the members, various teams, in
Right.
bringing ideas, getting feedback, and having a bottom-up approach as well.
Got
So,
it.
so it's a two-way communication that we definitely have, of
Mm.
informing, like keeping the employees updated. At the same time, it's about listening in, getting feedback, and
Yeah.
keeping the cycle going. So that's what we have been doing, and it's working. It's working for us in a good way.
Fantastic. So what I hear is dialogue, I hear listening, bottom up. I think these are great practices, I'm sure. So if you could share an example or a campaign that you're personally proud of where, internal comms was used, and how do you go about it? What was the challenge? What was the outcomes? And how did you measure the impact of all that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Ani, so what if I reflect around my recent experience with in my current job? I
Hmm.
think it was all about when I joined Bridgestone. It was all about we did not have a function of communication within the organization.
Got it.
So it was a clean slate, but there was a great need because our leadership believed that while we are doing this holistic transformation of the organization to establish ourselves as a solution organization that's headed towards securing a larger portion and leadership position in the India market, it was very critical for us to ensure that our teams across levels understand this transformation journey,
Got it.
understand what it is about, what we want to achieve, and how. Though
Got it.
it's not, yeah. So therefore, I think very recently, when I joined just 2 years back, partnering with the leadership team to drive this message through, ensuring that we have developed a full-rounded communication program from scratch, and
Right.
institutionalized
Got
various programs which
it. Right.
now run year on year to ensure that our teams are engaged, they are
Hmm.
well informed about where we are heading and what is our journey and how can they contribute. So I think very proud of that, what we have achieved as a team in the recent past. Also, one of the things I would like to say is that very fortunate to work with good leadership wherein they believe in the power of communication, as I said, and
Hmm.
they lend
Hmm.
that time and effort to meet people. So we have
Got
a
it.
program which we have institutionalized called as In Conversation with MD, and
Okay.
wherein our leader, our managing director, actually takes time out to meet with groups of people and sharing his vision and understanding their thoughts, and
Right.
what could it really mean for the organization. So I think those particular aspects have been profoundly have had an impact on our journey of kind of creating this change within the organization and ensuring that the strategy is well communicated and understood by all. So these are certain examples that they just come on top of my mind, which I
Fantastic.
think I are very well understood by people. At the same time, I strongly believe that we must have matrix to measure results,
Yeah.
and follow I what we do is that we follow an annual communication efficacy survey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we kind of run that across the organization to study various parameters in which
Mhm.
how has the engagement been, what is the changes that we have achieved on some of the important aspect, what has
Got it.
been the engagement with various topics. So that
Hmm.
kind of gives us a fair idea of how are we navigating and what has been our progress. So that kind of helps us to keep ourselves on course.
Fantastic. These are fantastic insights because I like the fact that you were talking of institutionalizing how communication is done, which is about standardizing and ensuring that it's consistent. And also the fact that you're doing this survey, I think that's a great thing. I mean, not many companies do that. So
Yeah.
kudos to your team. So,
Yes, I think we're blessed with a good team, so we are able to run a few good things. Yeah.
so if you could tell me, what is your biggest challenge as a communicator, internal communicator, in managing all of this?
So, Ani, so you will agree with me that communications is all about ensuring that we are able to deliver a right message to the
Hmm.
audience.
Right.
So I think understanding the various target audiences in the organization, we cannot bucket employees as one set of audience, if I may put it in that way.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
understanding that there are various levels and there
Hmm.
are various employees whose needs are very different. So being
Correct.
able to segment our employees in a certain way that can help them to, for us to understand what are their needs, what are
Hmm.
the drivers, and then
Got it.
communicating the message in a way that is understood very clearly by them is
Got it.
something which I think is a big challenge, and we constantly strive to achieve that.
Got
So
it.
I think that is what is very critical to understand what drives them and be able to communicate that.
And related to that, what's the biggest opportunity you see?
Yeah, again, a good one. I think the opportunity is that today information is available to one and all. And
Hmm.
it's not about an official channel of communication, or
Right.
it's not about it is so vast that now it's available through social media, it's available in digital forms. So I think in this era of communication, being extremely open and factual about communication, and being the first one to communicate becomes critical in internal communication.
Got it.
So internal communication needs to be a function which can be looked upon for giving the right information, updating the organization. And I think
Right.
if you're able to anchor that in a good way, I think that's a very strong opportunity for us to play a pivotal role to ensure that we are able to navigate the organization through situations. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so, there are these thoughts that, internal communication doesn't have a seat at the table and it's very difficult to get buy-in. So, what is your recommendation? What's your advice on how internal communicators can add more value to the business?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think all of us as communicators have always had that to grapple about. And yes, I think this is a challenge that definitely exists about the voice at the table and the chair. But more importantly, as soon as we are able to act as partners to business and
Hmm.
leadership,
Right.
and are able to translate strategies, the business strategies, into engaging communication, I think we'll add more and more value.
Got it.
So that's where I think it all comes together, because it's important for a communicator to not only look at communication from a message point of view, but
Hmm.
extremely important to get a big picture, understand what the business strategy is, why we are doing certain things the way we are, and then
Hmm.
able to translate that to the various sections. As soon as we are able to get that balance, I think it's going to be very critical for to kind of take steps and be the partners for leadership as well as business.
Fantastic. And so, the fact that the function is evolving so much, what are some of the key skills you think internal communicators must have or develop going
Yes.
forward?
So as we all know, I think it's very the technical skills, whether it's writing, whether soft skills, communication, being able to manage stakeholders, those all are very critical to any
Right.
communicator. But I think more and more people need to be working very close with business,
Hmm.
being able to work very closely with leadership from a strategy point of view.
Correct.
Once as communicators, we are able to get this big picture and understand the business, I think we'll be able to add more value. And
Hmm.
that's where I think the function needs to also kind of evolve and move on. So these are certain skills, along with stakeholder management, being able to navigate through ambiguity. It's always a gray area which we need to kind of grapple with. So I think these are certain skills, I would say, which kind of makes you a better communicator.
Great. Now, there are a lot of people who want to understand more about internal comms and join this domain. So, if someone was starting from scratch, what advice would you give them about joining internal communications as a career?
Oh, communications as a career is a brilliant career, I must say, and it's evolving. So I think it is one area where you can paint the canvas, extremely creative, because I don't think it's a single day when you feel tired of doing just the same thing, because every day it's something creative that you're doing.
Right.
It's value that you're creating, engaging. So it's a very creative area, which I
Yeah.
think is very, very energizing. And I must say, communication is evolving. The
Hmm.
recent pandemic which has hit us, I
Yeah.
think communication has been quite central to the way we have been able to drive and inform our various stakeholders. And this
Correct.
is true for all organizations. You will agree with me that it has
Yeah.
been, I think, since the day we all of us have been at it, informing our various stakeholders. So,
Hmm.
this area is also evolving quite rapidly,
Hmm.
and therefore this I really believe that it's a good stream to be a part of. It's a good
Yeah.
career to have. And while we start to learn more about business as communicators, I think it's going to only have a positive impact in our careers.
Great. And I always ask this question to women leaders. So, as a woman leader and as a employee, what is your thinking? What should women do differently, or how should they progress with thinking about communication, internal communication as a career or a domain? What's your advice for them?
Yes. Okay, so this question, I really feel, Anis, so that it's not about women or men, but I just feel that women kind of blend very well with this function. They are able to balance many roles. They are able to be fantastic, have a fantastic stakeholder engagement is very critical in this role. So I think it blends well. And also, I think they bring in that element of emotion. One can be emotional in this field. You
Right.
can understand what the audience needs. You can
Right.
communicate that better. So this field kind of blends well and offers itself well to the communication to women as from a professional point of view.
Got it.
While I say that, I think it's very critical to be partnering the business. Again, I come back to the same thing. It's all about being able to partner the leadership in
Right.
understanding what the big picture is and how do we translate that into
Right.
engaging communication. And I think women can play that role well. They can bring in that balance, and I think they have that knack of being able to navigate through tough situations, which I
Mm.
think many times is pretty daunting and comes as a challenge for communication professionals.
Got it. Fantastic. And now you mentioned about the pandemic and how it's changing the way we operate. So, what is your advice, or what do you think will change, from a internal communication standpoint, or what will stay the same? What are your thoughts around that?
I think digital, it's always been. So we were definitely moving into the digital space, and we had started to communicate so much more digitally. But I
Mm.
think this only becomes a norm. And with COVID and the pandemic that has hit us, the speed of response, digital technology has become all the more critical. So
Correct.
I think these are going to be some of the changes that we will have to evolve and adapt to. And
Mm.
I think they are going to be the constant. So they are going to be something the new normal, as I say. So we will
Exactly.
have to adapt ourselves in the virtual world and
Right.
continue to communicate. At the same time, I think we have a larger role to play by because there is this virtual distance that has been created. How do communication professionals help to bridge the gap?
Got it.
Help to create higher engagement, ownership in the organization, and
Mm.
keep that same balance that used to be. So I
Right.
think that's the larger role that I think communication professionals will need to play going forward and adapt more and more to technology. And yeah, I think these would be something that will be the norm of the new normal.
Great. And is there any trend that comes to your mind apart from the digital thing which you mentioned? Anything that strikes you about internal communications per se?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is that there were days when internal communication, I mean, of course, it was a long time, but there were days when internal communication used to be a top down approach, wherein it was just an information giving. You have to
Correct.
just talk about one way communication.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that has that has changed phenomenally. And it's all about building a dialogue and a bottom up communication. It's all about engagement, what we are talking about now. It's
Got
all
it.
about taking making it very inclusive and empathetic and adding a lot of empathy to it.
Mm.
When I say that, it's celebrating smallest successes which could be
Yeah.
replicated, learning from those experiences so that they can, and if there is a failure, it's also that okay, you adapt to it quickly. So
Yeah.
I think it's all about and it's more for me communications is now more about bottom up. It's
Mm.
about letting the leadership also listen to the voice of what
Yeah.
employees have to say, and not
Correct.
just one way communication which the top management has to give. So I think that's been a big shift, and I'm very happy about that. So I think it's something that's very powerful.
So, Pallavi, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you if, according to you, if there was one thing that you wanted to change about internal communications, what would that be?
To be honest, I really wouldn't want to change anything about internal comms. Yes, I think there. I think there is diversity in leaders as well who see communication very differently. But
Right.
I would really like them to see communication as partnering with them to
Mm.
ensure that their vision and their strategy is communicated to the last man standing and
Right.
also get the voice. So this is what I would really like the leaders to start acknowledging about communication. And
Right.
I really believe that this is a evolving profession, and it's an
Mm.
evolving stream, and
Right.
we must try to adapt to the changes that are there, be
Mm.
more inclusive, and try to create an open and transparent culture. I think that's what communications is all about.
This has been brilliant, Pallavi. I think you have, given such insightful responses, very, very powerful thoughts to, these questions. I think this will be very, very useful and relevant to all the viewers. So thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you, Anisu. Thank you for this conversation. It's been brilliant speaking to you. Thanks a lot.